In this video, I'm going to show you the basic of Kubernetes from a developer perspective. Kubernetes is a very big and complex topic. In this video, I will try to show this topic in as simple as possible. So as a developer, what you want to do, you want to create your application, put it into a container and deploy it. This is simple, but in reality, you have many containers and you need to be able to manage them somehow. Kubernetes is such a tool that help you manage your container. Kubernetes is also known as container orchestration platform. This is an overall view of Kubernetes cluster. You have a control plane on top that handles multiple worker node, and inside one of those multiple worker node, you have a pod, and inside that you have your container where you have your application. Generally, in production environment, you will use a system like EKS for the control plane. Uh, Everything else you have to handle by yourself. The previous image is a bit intimidating, so I created my own to show the structure in more simple way. You will install Kubernetes, then create the namespace. All our resources for that app will be grouped under that namespace. So you have this service, ingress, and your container. We will explain it in a minute. So first thing first, you need to set up Kubernetes on your machine. So if you are using Docker desktop for your Docker system, then you can simply go to settings and from there select Kubernetes and enable Kubernetes and apply and restart. After that, you also want to install kubectl and Helm. I will explain what those are in a minute, but these are like prerequisite. And if you are using Linux, then yeah, Kubernetes desktop is not available there. So Kubernetes desktop is only available for Windows and Mac. So again, if you are using Linux, then and from there you can install Minikube to set up this cluster locally for testing purposes. Again, in production, you'll probably use some EKS or something similar as mentioned before. All right, after all this setup, the next thing you want to do is install Lens. So Lens is a Kubernetes monitoring and managing tool. So you definitely need to install that. And once you install that and started the Kubernetes cluster, you can open the Lens and go to this catalog, and you'll see your desktop, Docker desktop Kubernetes cluster. So first we want to do, as mentioned, we want to set up the namespace in the slide. So let's do that. So for that, everything we are going to do is we are going to do via YAML file. So for creating namespace, we're going to create this namespace.yml, and from there you put the API version. So these are coming from the documentation of Kubernetes. The kind is going to be namespace, and the metadata is the name. So these under this name, all other resources are going to be grouped together. So you give the name as bookstore, and now to apply this, we go to Lens again. Open a terminal from this bottom place. So this terminal actually connected with your cluster. So anything you will do over here is going to reflect on the cluster only. So from your terminal, go to your projects, or where we put the configuration file, and to apply this namespace, run this kubectl. So as I mentioned, you need to install this kubectl. This kubectl applies the configuration to the cluster. So the command is kubectl apply -f, the file name, in this case the namespace.yml. So after I execute this, you'll see this namespace is created, and if you click on this namespace on the left, you'll see this namespace over here. So now first let's deploy our application. So for deploying our application, we will create another file called deployment YAML file. In here, we will mention everything related to our app. Uh, this again comes from the Kubernetes documentation. Kind has to be deployment, some metadata. Here we mentioned that under which namespace this resource is. So we created this bookstore namespace. So we give that namespace name over here, give it a name, and in the spec we have some selector and template. Let's ignore that for now. I will explain that in a minute. And so next we go into spec. Here we mention what our app is. So we want to create our app and yeah, make a Docker image out of it. So you can use many method. If you're using a Spring application, you can use this boot image task to create it, or any other way you want to create the image and yeah, publish it somewhere in a Docker hub, or yeah, maybe ECR for a production environment. So from there you uploaded the image. So it could again be just Nginx. So it doesn't have to be a Spring application. It could be just Nginx. So yeah, for me, I'm using this custom image that I created, and I'm mentioning where it is running. So it's a Spring Boot applications. Default port is port 8080. You could put, I mean, run it in any other port and just mention it over here. Next, the resource. Here we mention per request what is the maximum CPU we are going to give. So generally what it means is just divide this 250 by 1000, and that's the amount of percentage you are going to give for of a single core. And memory is yeah, memory for the request. You can also define the max limit. So you can say okay, the max limit is 350, and again some max memory that this container can use. In the security context, there are some other contexts. So this is the basic where you need to say how if the container can run anything as root. Here I am mentioning it false, but in production it's always going to be true with some other fields as well. And finally, if your application uses some environment variable, you can set them up over here, give the name, and this is the secret name from the Kubernetes and the key of the secret name. So let's first set this up into the Kubernetes using lens. So in the lens, if you go to config, under the config use secret, here you create and give this name as you mentioned over here. Mention the namespace, secret type is opaque, and in here you put the key and yeah, whatever value you want over there. Important thing to mention, if you select or add secrets this way, then you can put the plain text. But if you want also to add this secret via configuration YAML, then you have to put base64 encoded. So how you can, so I have set this. Now I will show how you can add this rather than doing it manually. You can also do that with the YAML file. So for that you create secrets.yaml file, and there you mention the kind and metadata. Just give it any name that you given in here, booster secret, and the namespace like before, the same namespace to group together. Type opaque, and here as I mentioned you have to put base64 encoded value. You cannot put plain text over here. To apply this secret, it's same as the namespace. Just put the remove the namespace and put secrets.yaml. Since I already created this, I'm not gonna run it again. Okay, with this, as I mentioned, we have this deployment. Now if we can to deploy it in the cluster, we have to run apply and our deployment file name. In this case it's deployment YAML. Now you see that we have it's created. Now if you go to pod, select the namespace, you see the namespace over here. As you can see that it's starting, and you can see how the app is starting from these pod logs. Here you can see the Spring app is running. So it doesn't have to be again a Spring app, it can be any kind of app. So once it's started, you can access this application, but if you click on here, you'll see that it doesn't give any external port or IP that can be used to access this. So it has given some IP somewhere if you scroll down. but it is actually not accessible from outside. Yeah, here. But it is not accessible from outside. It's just this inside. It's just an IP inside the Docker cluster. So currently, you can see the app is running, but yeah, we cannot access it. So if we go back to the slide, I mentioned that this service. So this service is actually required to expose this container to outside. So let's create the service. To create the service again, we will create this service file. Yeah, it can be any names, and inside just put the kind service and give the metadata whatever name you want, and namespace same as before, has to be same as others. Finally, the selector here, we are mentioning where it is pointing to. So this selector is something I said to ignore for now. So this is that selector part. So here we are mentioning that this is the selector name, and with this name, this service is connected to this deployment. Finally, the port. So this is the port of this service. And if something comes to this service, where it is going to go, it's going to go to port 8080 where our app is running. Finally, there is another option which is load port. Here you can mention that which from outside which port it is being exposed. That is optional. If you don't give it, then it just creates a random port for you. Okay, with that, let's go to the terminal of Lens and run this apply again, but this time with service. Now, if you go to under network, you'll see services, and from here, if you click and you get this from here, you'll just create this forward and select this random and just click the start. If you wait for a few seconds, you see the app is running now and is accessible from outside. All right. Next, there is two problem. One is this: it's showing localhost and this port. So in a general production environment, you don't want to see this localhost. You will see some name, for example, google.com, and yeah, that's it. There is no port. So yeah, to do that, remove this localhost, you get some domain, and yeah, point that domain to this IP. But how do you remove this port? So to remove this port, we are gonna use nginx ingress controller. So for that, first we need to install the nginx. So when you start Kubernetes in local or in EKS, this does not actually create this ingress controller, so you need to set that up. So to set it up, you have to go to this website. Yeah, get the instruction to install. So here it's showing the nginx ingress, but you can use any other ingress. So there's a couple of other ingresses available. So yeah, for this actually you need this helm that install this ingress for you with this command. Okay, once that is set up, you want to create a ingress YAML file. Open the ingress YAML file. Here you again, these are taken from the documentation. So kind is going to be ingress, and metadata, give it a name, and the namespace same as before, bookstore, to group everything together. Finally, the spec, the ingress. So you're using ingress, that's why we mentioned this ingress class name, and the rules. So yeah, if something goes to this bookstore.com, then it goes to the service that. So if you open the service, you see this name is same as the name over here, and the port. So what's the main port? So main port is 80. So if I go to this 80, then it goes where switch goes to the 8080 of our application. And that's it. Now with that, you go to the lens, and this time you run the ingress, apply the ingress to the cluster. So this creates the ingress underneath the network. Go to ingress and you'll see this So it's first time when you run it, it's going to take some time and give you the IP over here. So this IP, yeah, as you can see, it's showing localhost, but if you're running it EKS, AWS EKS, then you'll see some IP over here. Also, you'll see the IP if you're running this cluster on your local Linux environment. But yeah, for Windows and Mac, it shows localhost. Anyway, with this information, you can add a entry. So like you mentioned that, yeah, if you want to go to bookstore.com and it will go to your application, so you can add this bookstore.com to Etsy host and see that this is how I added this bookstore.com and pointing to the 127001. 127001 is the local host. Now with that, if I now go to the browser and remove this port and write the bookstore.com only, you can see the same result. So yeah, that's kind of the basic of how you can deploy your application. But one thing I want to mention over here is, as you can see, we are executing so many commands over here. This, yeah, apply this, and apply this. So imagine you have like a lot of containers. So for each of the container, if you have to do this manually, which is a very big task. So that we don't have to do this all manually and multiple times, there is a package manager in Kubernetes which is called Helm, a Helm chart, and yeah, with that Helm chart you can do all of this in one command. So let's set that up. So for setting that up, you're gonna create a folder, yeah, put it any name, and inside there is a template, and this template you'll see these files are exactly same as this file. So if you go to this ingress file and go to this ingress file, you'll see the same. Only difference is this templating. So you can put this name over here, no problem. Like you can keep exactly the same over here, but with this template you can reduce the duplication. For example, you can put this app name over here only, and if you need to change the app name, you only need to change it over here. You don't need to do that in multiple places, and you can just refer this. For example, this deployment, if I open this, you can see this, you can run this value.app name in every places. It's going to replace with that app name from the value. So that's the beauty of Helm and Helm values. And this is the chart that mentioned the release of the chart. This has the information about the Helm chart. Again, this comes from the doc. Use the latest one. Always give it a name, description, and type, and yeah, API version. Okay, with that, first what I'm going to do is go to the lens again and delete all the resources that we have under the namespace. An easy way to do is just delete the namespace. So this actually deletes the namespace and deletes all the resources associated with this. So if I go to the pods, you will see that yeah, bookstore is gone, and yeah, bookstore namespace, all the pods related to bookstore namespace is also gone. So yeah, before installing the Helm, I mean installing everything with Helm, we need to set up the namespace manually again. So that's the only thing we have to do. And after that, if we want to, yeah, install the Helm, and the install command, and this is the Helm name and the location where it is. So this is the folder name. So you're giving this folder name, and it's all the same name. So probably I had this already in my system. So let's just delete that. And yeah, so with this command, you can set up everything. So if you go to the namespace and the pod now, you can see the bookstore. You can see the associated bookstore over here. You can see the service is also there, and then ingress is also there. So it's the same thing that we have mentioned over here, but you don't need to explicitly apply each of the file. You can just do that with one command, as I mentioned. So all you need to do is just put it under the template, and yeah, mention the whatever values that you need to pass inside those templates if needed. Again, if you want to change something, for example, you want to have multiple replica, let's say two replica, and yeah, you want to execute that into your cluster, it's also very easy. You run helm upgrade booster and yeah, folder name. You see immediately the revision 2, and if you go to the pods, you'll see now there is two pod for your container. You can change it back again to one, and yeah, execute the same command, you'll see one is terminating, and there will be only one left. So that's how easy it is to handle your cluster, yeah, and yeah, set up your cluster with Kubernetes. And again, if you go to the browser, this will still work. So yeah, first time it's gonna take some time because it is setting up, and yeah, once it is set up, you'll see that it's loading up. Yeah, that's it. That's all I wanted to show you in this video, to have the yeah basic knowledge of Kubernetes from a developer's perspective, how you can interact with it and how you can change stuff around. And yeah, hopefully it was helpful. If you have any question, feel free to ask in the comment below. I will put the code that I have showed and in the GitHub, and share the link in the video description. Thanks everyone. Have a nice day. Bye bye.